And I think we're live. The choice is taken out of my hands entirely. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the GM Roundtable Workshop, Storytelling and Narrative Fiction. Hey. Hi.
Hey.
I'm Chug, the moderator. I'm on Desis&Dragons. I'm one of the founders. You see me here and there. But this isn't about me. This is about all these wonderful people we've got with us. Let's go around in a counterclockwise order because I'm wild like that. Starting with Roshni.
Hey. Yes. Oh, what are we saying? Oh, about us?
Yeah, just introduce yourself.
Great start. Okay. Hi everyone. I am Roshni. I have been playing D&D and RPGs for the last 3 years about. I'm fairly new, and yeah, I'm here mostly to learn from everyone else on this stream.
Nice. Next up, let's hear it from Tanfighter. What voice are you using to introduce yourself today?
I would be using my own voice. Thank you very much. Otherwise, I'll have to keep it up for a few hours. Or an hour. But yeah, I have been playing D&D for the most part now, a few more systems for about 4 years, and have been DMing for those 4 years. So yeah, I would love to, just talk to other people who are also in the same boat as me for once.
Mm-hmm. Next up, let's hear it from Adi. I think I said your name right or wrong. You tell me.
It's Adi, but it's perfectly
Adi.
fine. All right. So, been playing D&D pretty much exclusively for the last 5 years, DMing for the last 2. I'm new to the server and I'm looking to play with everyone.
Yay! Next. Wonderful. Next, someone else we want to play with. Let's hear it from Ayush.
Hi guys, I'm Ayush. I have been playing TTRPGs like D&D, Savage Worlds, etc. for more than 15 years now, almost.
Oh, nice.
I love board games, I love video games, I love fantasy, science fiction, and I'm here to hear from you guys about what you think about gaming in general and the specific topic today.
Nice. It's nice finding someone else who's been playing it for over 15 years like me. Good times. And last but not least, let's hear it from the shadiest person on this table, Shady Shay.
Hi guys, so I've been playing TTRPGs for now a little more than 2 years. I've been DMing most of the time and I recently started playing, so it'll be fun talking to other DMs and learning from their experiences and discussing the topics today.
Nice. Excellent. So, glad to have everyone here. And let's just remind what the focus of this specific workshop, the fourth in a series of 5, is about. It's about the storytelling in games and the narrative fiction. This is a system agnostic kind of talk, so you can use it for D&D, you can use it for Savage Worlds, GURPS, whatever game you're playing. This should hopefully be helpful for you. And I think like the thing to keep in mind is when we're considering narrative games, narrative TTRPGs, it's good to know that games used to be divided in like what their goal was. There were gamist games, which was basically we need to win. It's like a video game, we got to win. Simulation, like I'm living a whole world. I don't care what happens. It's just like this world is being simulated. And our topic, narrative, which is like you're trying to tell a story with your players. And some games you can do it with all kinds of games, but some games do it really well. Like really focus on either telling narratives in general or a very specific narrative. Does anyone have like a narrative game that they really like a narrative system that they think does narrative really well or in a very unique way? Anyone want to go first? I will teach you and pick somebody if you guys don't do it.
Well, in TTRPGs, I have always tried to find a balance between things. Like while we talk about the game being narrative in nature, when I got into the game, we were very combat oriented because we came from video games, etc., that we used to play. Games like Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, etc. That's where we got introduced to D&D. That's where we got introduced to the idea of games where story was important.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So it's been Dungeons and Dragons for me very largely. Like I have used Dungeons and Dragons and games similar to that, like Savage Worlds, to primarily tell stories, get character interactions, and have good combat as well on the side, and to create worlds in general. I've been very lucky because a game like D&D, since I've come from mostly the Forgotten Realms, it's already such a well-developed world that I can pick and choose stories. There are so many stories that have been already been told in it. Characters are already so well developed. I can often take inspiration from a lot of places. Uh, find find the setting or the tone, not the setting. The setting is the same, but find the right tone that I want to grab for a game.
Very
D and
true.
D have been pretty. D&D, Savage Worlds, they have been the big ones for me.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. Especially like D&D has like a wide spectrum, so figuring out what the tone of the setting you want to use or the game you want to use can really affect it. Like if you're using Dark Sun, which is very gritty, post-apocalyptic, you get a very different tone from like high fantasy Faerun or Galarian or whatever you want to use. So I get that. Tan Fighter, what about you?
Yeah.
Any games that you think really do narratives in a you really like how they do narratives or does it in a weird, interesting way?
So, like, apart from D&D, which is again probably
Mhm.
my highest experience like system, but I will say PBT also like just masks in general, like
Mhm.
just the way how it takes away from a lot of like the crunchy mechanics and it like deals more with just giving the story in the hands of your players basically,
Mhm.
and the narrative just bounces off of the GM rather than the GM dictating the narrative there.
Yeah.
That's a very cool system, and honestly, like even what we were doing, like with the Fate system, it's a very similar feel to that. Like
Mhm.
the GM has more agency than PvT, but they still are cooperating with the player to like weave that story, and it makes a more fleshed out narrative, in my opinion.
Yeah. I like PPTA games because I think it was one of them which was like saying fiction first, and like the mechanics exist to like enable whatever the fiction of the specific genre you're doing. Apocalypse World has the fiction of like your post-apocalypse. Monster Heart, your horny teenage monsters, and Mask is teenage superheroes dealing with expectation. So like the mechanics are built for those kind of stories. Anyone else want to shout out like a narrative game that they like they think does it really well, or they have like a specific opinion on, or anything like that?
I
Mhm.
I got a question. Did you just say horny teenage monsters? Just I
Yep,
want to make sure I heard that right.
that is Monster
Okay.
Heart. Yes, yeah. You can play it without
Okay.
the horny, but even without that, they're still terrible teenagers. With or without the monster parts, they're just terrible in the best way.
I have a new thing to look into.
Oh yeah, there's a whole Monster Hearts server that's always running on this server, like a Monster Hearts campaign. Anyone can join. I'll send you. Someone will direct you to this after that. Otherwise, I'll direct you to it. But it's fun.
All right.
It's very fun. Yeah. And one. Anyone else want to shout or?
I think I just agree with what you just said. What was being said. I have not played a lot of other RPGs, but I definitely agree that Masks gives us a very good stage to tell a story because of a lot of elements, because it takes away a lot of the crunchy elements of RPG and gives us more options to storytell. Like the whole potential thing. If you fail, you gain potential. That's such a cool little thing which you can role play, and I really like it. So.
Yeah, definitely. Shady?
No,
Oh,
continue.
okay, sure. I came like from a D&D point buy kind of system, D&D 3.5 champions. So it was like I was very much like I need to win or I need to be effective. I need to figure out what's the right equation. And then narrative games like Monster Hearts and like the one I want to like talk about a little bit is like Fiasco. Like those are just completely narrative. It is basically you are telling a story and it's not about winning. At that point, winning or losing is a fun game. Even if your character has a horrific Coen brothers, hilarious or depressing tragedy, whatever happened, it is still you're still telling a story. At that point, you realize the objective is telling a story, not I'm going to win. I'm going to get the best ending or the true ending. So like that Fiasco specifically because it's great. It can do almost any genre. That kind of like helped broke my mold from like it's about telling the story as opposed to like we need to win or
Yeah.
everyone will be upset with me.
Yeah.
If I may jump in a little at Fiasco.
Mm-hmm.
Fiasco is one of the earliest TTRPGs that I played. They were simple 2-page ones that I would take to parties and just share with everybody. And I have found that it finds it creates a great atmosphere because narratively, in a way, Fiasco as a game is designed that eventually things are going to go wrong. That's the entire concept of the game. Midway through the game, there's going to be a fiasco.
Yeah.
So people there is another beautiful mechanic in it where in the middle you'll take time to tell a flashback where you'll set things up.
Mhm.
So it brings a lot of people in into just the idea of being a character, of finding out what the story is going to be. And like we talk about storytelling in TTRPGs particularly, and this is most of them. When I'm talking about them, TTRPGs, we forget there is like a third player also involved. We have a game master, we have the player characters, but the random aspect, which is the dice, I think that's a straight up character in itself, which is telling the story.
Yeah.
Because everything you're doing, everything you're trying to say, somewhere or the other, to make it a game, you bring dice into it. That
Yeah,
randomization is also what builds a story. And to have people open up and see, be cool with any consequences, and not just winning. Be cool with anything happening. A game like Fiasco does that very well. Yeah, beautiful game.
Definitely. The dice have their own story they want to tell. Right. Very
Yeah.
true.
I don't mind. May I just build on that for a minute?
Sure.
So, what I've noticed in my games of D&D is that the dice play what I think is the most crucial role. It prevents the game from just becoming a conversation where the DM says X and the players respond to Y. The dice add that critical, that critical element of chance where no one knows exactly what's about to happen, and that while nothing is certain, nothing's impossible either. So I absolutely agree that the dice play a massive impact in the narrative of any game because it forces everyone to be on their toes.
Yeah. It's because of things like dice. In games like Fiasco, in other words, you can't say like, "Oh, I'll be fine" because plot armor, or because I'm the protagonist. Like, nope, the dice do not care. Or because of the dice, you're like, "Oh my god, that guy was the protagonist the whole time. He had the happy ending." Or like, "Oh, you did not get comeuppance, or you did, or however." So, yeah, definitely, I get that 100%.
Yeah, just building on what Adi said, I think so. I agree with the aspect on the dice bit about more than while it plays an important character. I feel it also drive. It's one of the main tools of driving it forward with the player's choices also coming to play because no matter with the randomness of it, it's what you think is important. I think so that really helps build really good characters because for example, if I'm a character who's really smart and I build my character like that, I know that I'll be better at it. The dice bring out that aspect of it, like mixing your skill with the randomness, which is a lot true what happens in reality to some extent as well. Like you're good at few things, you're bad, and the dice just say how better you are at that instant.
I would like to expand on that element. Like you talk about the characters, like your choice of characters and how the dice can influence the characters by talking about character arcs, not just for the players but also for the villains. Like Tan, do you have any thoughts about how in this game where dice can take control or you don't know what the players are going to do, how you can create like interesting like character arcs for like the players and the villains when you don't know the middle or even the ending?
Yeah, so I have a very different approach when I'm dealing with players or villains for character arcs. But for villains, for example, you when you're writing a villain, you would know a motivation, why they're doing what they're doing, who they are, like because you're writing them. You have their backstory, you have information on them. And what you don't know is how the players will interact with the villain. You can have a 2-minute long monologue prepped up, and they will just show up and attack him. Like it won't matter. And at the end of the day, what you need to do is what I at least do is build a cornerstone, like something that acts as a basis of what drives a villain and motivation behind why that cornerstone exists. That gives them their arc and their backstory. So if it's an antagonist that you see every now and then, or if it's even your BBEG, over the course of a long story, you will see that same motivation come out in different places in different ways. And that's like, their arc building up all the way till their peak, which is where they would eventually fight your adventurers or whatever your players have. And they will eventually either have their downfall or they win, but they need to reach that peak. And for that peak to exist, you need a cornerstone that they are following. Otherwise, there's no otherwise they become a Saturday morning villain where they aren't really doing anything except for like a gimmick. But for your players, it's the exact opposite because you want to give as much agency as there is to your players for their own arcs. You want to give them control over their story while it's shaping around your world. And in that sense, what I like to do, I always use this example because it's like the easiest one to explain. But let's say in D&D or something, you have a player who's like, "Oh, I want to be a noble." It's the easiest thing to work with because then you're like, okay, this person has a noble family. Create a noble family that's in your world. Give them reasons for existing. Give them a background. Like, why are they noble? What do they do? Are they liked? Does the character like his family? Do they like him back? And then while they're playing the character, just making their own story interact with them, bouncing it back and forth, that gives them this almost self-building arc with its own emotional trauma, problems, all kinds of wholesome moments even. And you pair that stuff with basically any of these links that they've given to you, you pair that stuff with loss, or you pair that stuff with danger in any way, and that gives them stakes, and those stakes drive them to do certain things, and they start writing their own story, and that becomes their character arc.
Yeah.
But
I like how you were saying about cornerstones. Like as you were talking, realize like you make up the cornerstone for your villains. Like you say, like, this is their motivation, or this is their need, or this is their desire, and like whatever's happening, like I must, I must take over the kingdoms. Anything's happening, you have that thing. Or it's like I must, rescue my mother's soul from hell, and I'll kill anybody to do it. That keeps the villain going even when things are going. But it's also interesting because you were bringing up that the players create their own cornerstone, and your job is not to necessarily just remember what that cornerstone is, but to kind of attack that cornerstone or put difficulties in there. Like if someone's cornerstone, like, oh, I want to be king, and then they're like, oh no, easy, it's going to be easy, just live a little bit. But no, you got to put difficulties. You got to kill their father and make them think they did it, which is both. Am I talking about Hamlet or Lion King? That's for you to figure out.
Yeah. Lovely examples.
No, but exactly, like that's literally what it is. Because at the end of the day, if your player stories are not actionable, or their stories are not something that naturally blend into the world, and they shouldn't just be a piece of text they wrote, like, this is my character, this is what they do. It should be something that constantly comes at them while they're playing, while they're in there. It should be something that bites back, basically. It should have consequences associated with it.
Yeah, it's got to be something that motivates and wants them to do, because like in games like D&D or like other ones, they're usually in a very dangerous profession, being an adventurer or being a monster hunter or whatever the game is. Like, they're putting themselves out there. They need to be like something that motivates them to keep going. Like, why am I in this dangerous world? Why am I not using my skill with magic or my skill with sword to do a much safer job? There must be something motivating me. So it's like being aware of what that motivation is can make the player do interesting character arcs. They consider, what am I willing to do for my motivation? Or even, is my motivation as important? Do I need to be king? Or can I live Hakuna Matata? It was Lion King.
I gathered. But yes, exactly that, actually. Like, because their motivations are something that will definitely change once they interact with the story and the world, with the other players even. And railroading that will never lead to a satisfying character arc for them. Letting there be an element of surprise in what can happen to their character, letting there be an element of change associated with the change in the world and the story. I think that's very important, and that's what primarily makes them differ from villain character arcs.
Definitely. Does anyone else have any do they do character arcs differently, or they like manage character arcs for villain players in their own way, or any other thing they want to like comment on that?
So just building. Oh, sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead, Shady, please.
So I think building on what Tan was saying about just about having the world bite back, like about situation biting back to them. I think sometimes an interesting thing what I generally like to do in my games is how they are reacting to few situations that they are putting, which are not just active situations. You walking down and seeing a child hurt is probably just we start with a description, but sometimes the player can take something that's small because if that's important to them, or if that's their background where they care about like children for that sake and they want to go and help them out. And whereas some other player who has a complete opposite reaction, then you see that interaction as well. So sometimes just standard things what would normally exist for anybody going through that could, and how they react to that is sometimes really interesting, and how that changes them or builds them up, or even more than sometimes making them different from the villain, make them realize how similar they are to the villain as well.
I think that's a good point. Before I go further in that, Ayush, did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I mean, love what I've been hearing here because I agree to a large extent. Where uh, I mean, while with a small caveat that it might depend slightly for me whether I'm running a one shot or if I'm running a slightly longer game. But I like to keep it slightly open. For me, a villain is like any other NPC in the game. They are really not that special because in the sense that it everything depends on how the PCs will interact with them. A, a villain can turn out to be an ally at the end of the thing. So what I look at it is what are all NPCs? So for all NPCs in my story, I have two primary questions, which is why are they here and what do they want? For the villain to matter in such a story, I would maybe add one thing that what the villain wants, how does it clash with what the PCs want,
Hmm.
either want or care about? So that's the one addition that I make when I'm building an NPC which is villainous in nature. Uh, how would it clash against whatever the PCs and their motives are? But otherwise, they remain largely constant to every other NPC that is there in the game.
Definitely, you can like do some various things when they want the same thing or they're in opposition. For example, if both of them want to get the lost sword or whatever for their own reasons, or even if there's like soldiers on different sides of the army on different armies saying like we both want our country to prosper, then you have that they have the exact same goal, but because they're different countries, it puts them at loggerheads when they could have been friends. They could have been friends. But yeah, definitely. Next up, going to be talk about we talk about like little. Shady said something interesting about like putting little bits in like the world and seeing how they're interacting. I think world building is could be a very useful tool for like improv and narration because world building is kind of like you're doing the prep work ahead of time. Like let's talk about like how does world building help make DMing like easier or just like making narrative storytelling easier, like making that world. Yeah, who's got thoughts on that? Ayush?
Uh, very interesting because, like I said at the very beginning, I use worlds that are already built.
Oh yeah.
World building for me is generally taking from places. I love lore. Being a complete nerd who's read fantasy, like massive tomes of fantasy and sci-fi novels my entire life, including like so many books set in Forgotten Realms, in Eberron, etc.
Mhm.
I have a sense for some worlds where I like to play. So I create my worlds are already there for me. Now, in that, there are so many sources that are available to me. Like, for example, if I take Forgotten Realms, there's a massive wiki which details everything about every character that has happened in canon, in lore, in general.
Yeah.
So my board is pretty much set for me. After that, I'll take other sources. I'll take things from YouTube, etc., where I listen to people talk about things and maybe pick some ideas from there. But the general world as is already built for me. Even the NPCs are mostly built for me. Cities like Waterdeep, cities like Silvery Moon, they are so detailed. Every NPCs are already, you know, in those things.
When you
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, when you have got that world kind of ready with all these NPCs and all these characters, it does make like telling a story better because you've got that kind of you know how these people are supposed to act, you know what they motivations, you get a kind of vibe for them. It makes storytelling a lot easier because you understand the world, but also you have this knowledge of like I know what fantasy stories are supposed to be like. I know what this genre is supposed to be, which it probably helps when you're telling us when you're doing a story.
Yeah, so I would like to add one caveat here that
Mhm.
I don't know about most people here, but I primarily run private games. That is, I run to play with my friends.
Sure.
So I already know the people who are there. I know we've all been we somewhere or the other we've read similar shit, we watched similar shit, we listen to similar music. So I already have a kind of vibe with my friends going on. So whenever I'm putting these things in, I know they will get. I know I put little gems in there for them to enjoy, like a character that I know that they're familiar with, or a theme, or a plot line that I know is very familiar to them. So that I like to keep that sort of like a meta level engagement as well, where we are laughing and playing together, along with telling a story, well, riffing on many things, many themes.
Definitely. You can definitely customize a story more if you play with the same group or like people you know very well. You can like make that story that much more special because you're not making it for a general audience. You're not making an MCU thing. You're making it just for your friends. So it's nice. It's like home cooked meal. I get that. Roshni, do you have any thoughts on how world building can help make DMing easier, or like creating stories and improv on the in the moment in the session?
Yeah, I think so. I have similar thoughts about world building ahead of time. But I have some things different. So, like Ayush was mentioning, he really likes, for example, Forgotten Realm and its massive, massive amount of lore,
Hmm.
which is already available in the world. So, I'm fairly new, so I have mostly played starter sets. In fact, I have played the starter set from Forgotten Realms, like Fandolin one. So, I have played those, but now I have been recently playing or DMing a campaign where I have it's more like a sandbox, so it's not a module. So there's no set places that they will go. So for me, it has been mostly about creating the space they start with. So for my campaign, camp for most of my previous campaigns, for example, has been either in a small village, they start in a small tavern in a village, or they were like in wasteland or where nothing to interact with. So most of my players, and I was also lucky with playing with my brother and my family members and cousins, so they wanted to play in an urban setting, and all I needed to do ahead of time was build this one city,
Mm.
kind of like Waterdeep would be, right? So, but build this one city and build out a lot of different interesting elements they can interact with. And I just created this and just placed it in front of them. And all they have done is go to elements that they like and pick up plot hooks or elements from there. And then I start fleshing out, going from there. I don't build everything, the lore. I just have a brief idea, but mostly I give it to them and they can explore from there on.
Nice. So you're more building, like figuring out what you need and building tall from there. Like one city, get it really detailed, as opposed to like here's the entire world and the backstory, all that kind of
Yes.
thing. So yeah, that's good. That's a very valid form of DMing. There's actually one person had a question they wanted to mention, which is exactly related to this. How much of your world do you have to know when you start running a campaign? I think Roshni, you've kind of answered that. You basically like the city that you need or the starting town, make it detailed, make it with the NPCs. Is that accurate?
Yeah, make it with NPCs, but also it depends from player to player. So if in a campaign I have players who are coming from different parts of the world,
Yeah.
and they all want to be, oh, I come from this particular city, and how have I reached to the starting town? So I kind of have to give them a bits
Yeah.
of, I kind of have to flesh out with them, maybe that, okay, maybe you met this boat and you do you want to be in a merchant boat, do you want to be in a trade boat, like a cargo boat, up to you, how what kind of a path you have taken. So it
Yeah.
really working with the players.
Right. And yeah, let's talk about like quickly, just for the other guys. How much how much of your world do you feel like you have to know when you start running a campaign? Ayush will do you last. We'll just get everyone else quickly, because I imagine Ayush has got a big answer. Shady.
I'm happy to listen.
I think mine was something similar to Roshi's when I started playing, but with one grave mistake where I want to explore a bits of area around the city, so I had to be a little more than what I'd initially planned. But I think so that approach works well for me, where I have like pockets ready, which I know have a general idea about them, that what happens in the city or what it's like, but start building about where my players are going next and start working from that way, because for me it's like I have the general lore, the background, but not too much detail about every city, every world, every lore. But as players go along, I think so I build my story with them at the same time.
That's fair. Adai?
All right. I'm going to build on what Shady said, because I run my worlds in a very similar way. I tend to cut my worlds from whole cloth, brand new original worlds with ideas flagrantly stolen from things I like. And I start in the same way. What are the players going to see first? What are they going to interact with first? That has the most detail put into it. And we get to the outer periphery. Where are they likely to go next? And where are they likely to go after that? Outer rings have less and less detail, to the point where the outermost rim is just a basic pencil sketch, maybe a single idea. And I build it as I go along with my players. One thing I like to do so that the world remains reactive and doesn't become a static world is that what the players do does reach, it has impacts on the areas that they will reach later. Say you have defeated the grand worm of Hin. By the time you reach the next town or the next city, they will have heard of this and they will react. Maybe they're angry that you killed the worm. Maybe they're not. The important part is that you build the world in reaction to your players' actions as well to make the world feel more alive. This is why keeping it just as a basic sketch comes in handy, so you can add details as in when your players generate them.
Nice. I like to imagine that your world, you kind of like have these rings of like, I've got this much developed, I got this much developed. So like as something the player does something, it spreads out to those rings. Like the next one, like, oh yeah, we know it's exactly those 2 elves, 1 orc, and a gnome who killed the worm. And then later it's like, we know 4 people did. And then there's a song. And then when you get to the outer ring of like influence, they've only just heard it, but they've added embellishments and they turned it into a drinking game. And it's like, it was 4 gnomes.
Exactly how it works.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, there were no gnomes. Tan. How much of your world do you know when you start running a campaign?
So I'm someone who likes running long campaigns, and what I do is what my friends call the madman approach, which is I write everything. Like I might be taking pieces of material from like content I like and basing stuff off of a lot of stuff that I like, but end of the day it becomes its own like thing. And all the cities, the kingdoms, what the state of the world is, why will there be a larger threat at play? Like, because if I am starting out an adventure at level 1, for instance, they'll be starting with something very basic, very small, probably, like just basic extermination missions, like starting out as adventurers. But at that point, I still want to know where the adventure is going to go. I want to know what's going to be the overall theme of it, where it's going to take the players, and how the world will get affected by it, how dark the world might get, for instance, or how certain large events are already like in my head, in place in the timeline, and there is a literal timer just going on until that happens in the world, and it's up to the players to kind of interact with the world, do whatever they want to do, follow whichever plot hook they do, and when that event happens, the event will react to them according to wherever they are in the world. And that's kind of like the main philosophy I follow, because then what happens is, even if when my players randomly decide to do the exact opposite of what you want in a quest or a story, I still know what they're going to do, because I know, oh, you're going to town B. Guess what? Town B has all of this stuff happening. They will react in a certain way to all of you showing up there. And there's its own plot hooks and everything exists over there. So no matter what you do, you are always running into more story in whichever direction you go into. And that way, even if there feels like there's no sense of direction, the plot is actually always moving forward. And then obviously there are certain like big events and all, which when they do happen, you have all of these threads in every single place that can pull the players into those big events one way or the other. So your story always moves forward then.
Yeah. You thought this was a filler arc, but no, it was I, with the writer of One Piece. It was all mattered. All of it
will all matter.
Yes. Ayush, I think you kind of already said a little bit of like, your world is kind of already made. You kind of know your world quite a bit, especially because you've been doing this for 15 years or plus, and you have all this knowledge of fantasy. Is it fair to say that you know your world really well when you start running a campaign?
Oh yeah, like I agree with Siron in the sense that I like fully realized worlds, like worlds which have extensive lore in them, where I can just take things. Which is why, like, I will all like, if there is a new person who's trying to get into the game, etc., who wants to start DMing, I would always say run pre-written adventures. You'll find them on DM's Guild. You can take an official game from the main source, the publisher. You have most things that you need to run a game in your source book, and if you want to expand on something, you can just Google things. You will find monsters, you will find cities, you will find NPCs, etc. Everything already there available for you. So I write story structures first, where I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. These are things that I want to say, have the characters say. Again, depends on the players, what they want to say and how I want to riff with that. And after that, it just becomes a point of giving names. So if I have a fully realized world available to me, then I can just take a city from there and put the name here and be like, okay, everybody else is from here. And now I can just run the story that I want to run, which I had prepared first.
Nice. For the benefit of the audio, when he said Saron, he meant Tan Fighter.
Tan Fighter.
There we go. Because there's double names.
I'll change my name.
It's okay. That's fine. Now
No, there is a Warcraft player named Saron, so that's why the name just stuck out to me. Sorry.
Now, we're going to skip over that obvious plot hook of us asking, oh, what kind of Warhammer? He won't fall for that. But let's talk about plot hooks that people will fall for. Shady, tell us about, how you create plot hooks. Like you mentioned, oh, that child is in need. I should probably help them. How do you create plot hooks, and how do you tie it into telling the story you want to tell?
So what I do with plot hooks is I generally keep two types of plot hooks. Some things which have a more grander plot to it, if one could say. So my player wants to figure out more about an unknown voice that he hears. So tries explore it, and that's the initial, and that he just wants to find out more. So that's his plot hook, and I'll try to build his character, do a lot of character development through that, because he can reach that same goal in multiple ways. And then how he goes about that will lead to, again, world events. So I think most of these things, what we're discussing about some aspects, even of the grander world events, what Tan was saying, or even when we're talking about character development or character arcs, I think I use my plot hooks for that mainly, and to drive my players to see how they would react to a situation, and then build on them depending on their previous interaction. The other types that I know which are going to be sucker punch moments for my players, which I know is going to be between something. So I know this small incident that they see while doing something else is going to have a reaction with them, or is going to help build them, going to have some even role playing between them, and that's the second type I keep. So the players are, even if you reach a moment, if you find if there's a little okay, let's just move the story forward, but you feel that a little need of players growing more, or if you feel that that's stopping for some time, I think these plot hooks come helpful at that moment. So if you see a child beggar example in the previous one, probably it may not even matter to the overall story. It's just one thing you just explained. I just want that plot hook, that to see, okay, my players I want them to see that they've just traveled for 3 days, and I just don't want them to rush to an inn and the next combat. I want to build on certain character moments, that when they see a child like this, or they see somebody suffering or something like that, how do they react? How do they interact with that? And that sometimes can be its own adventure on its own, if that child turns out to be working for a thieves guild, and then they have a full adventure of that, where they want to rescue them, or it can just be I ignore it and walk by, and then we just sit in the tavern while drinking and talk about that moment that one of us did. So I use plot hooks in both of these ways to build my overall narrative and take it forward from an individual character point of view, rather than an overall what my grander story is, and then for these individual character development moments, or a new adventure altogether, which is the worst when players decide to do.
Oh yeah, they always do that. This is why we spent Christmas fighting in the sewers of Wannabe Beholder. Anyone have any other opinions on
plot
hooks, or anything they want to add to that?
Honestly,
he
covered most of what I would have to say about it as well. So
yeah, I was just I have nothing to add. I have no notes. It's when someone is that good, what can you say?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
What we can say is talking. Sorry, Roshni, did you say something?
Oh no.
Did someone?
My mic is just weird.
Okay. Fair enough. Cool. Then I guess we go on now. Seeing these plot hooks, all these little ones. What are your tips? We kind of have the story. We know how to make things important to the characters. We have kind of plots or basic bits. But how do we make our world? How do we bring our world to life? What are ways to bring it? To make the world seem alive, make things happen. I'm sure there are different ways to do it. I have a hot take, or a somewhat hot take. It's just oh man. So my thing to make the world, world alive, is to make the characters, and people can expect this from me, is to make the characters, anyone, NPCs, all that, they have to feel alive. I feel like the world doesn't come to life if you don't see people reacting in different ways, or people acting in different ways. Or you see the world is oh, this exists because the people here need to. One stupid example from a game is the players came to this building and they opened it, it was big and there was a hole in the bottom and they didn't know what it was because it had these lights and these things. And then they realized, oh, this is a toilet designed for different sized creatures. This is a monster city. And you're like, this exists because characters need to poop. I mean, that's a silly example, but it's like, it makes your world come to life, having these things exist or events happen because characters wanted it to happen. I feel like I need more explanation, but I think monster poop toilet explains itself.
Honestly, you say it's a hot take, but I kind of agree with whatever you just said. So,
of course, how can you argue with monster
exactly?
Toilet? Yeah, but like
another tip is like, go ahead, Adi.
Hot takes are meant to be controversial, but making the world and the characters seem like they fit together, that's hardly controversial.
Yeah,
exactly.
So just,
I meant
this is one of those things like verisimilitude. Everything fits together. There's a bit in Dark Souls, the computer game.
Mhm.
You reach a city, right? There's a massive grand staircase leading up to the grand cathedral, but there's two sets of stairs, one tiny and one huge.
Yep.
The reason you realize later that this is a city of both gods and normal people, so two different sets of stairs of different sizes for two different races of creatures of different heights, and it just makes the world actually feel lived in.
Yeah.
Putting that feeling in your Dungeons and Dragons games or your TTRPG games, it takes a deft hand, but it's really worth it in the end.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad he said. Oh, go ahead.
Go, Tan, say it.
No, I was just like, I'm glad he said Dark Souls because, like, that's basically the inspiration of storytelling I take from, like, in the sense of just like, oh, you pick up a piece of item. Here is 1,000 years of lore behind it.
You are a madman.
I love that.
So mad.
Yeah.
But I also
all those history checks, etc. come in.
Yeah, definitely. You need those. But it's also like nice to know because you're trying to think like even when things are happening to this world, where there's like economic collapse or a meteor is arriving, or it's like a great impossible evil is coming, the thing that makes the world seem alive is seeing how people react to it. Like that Netflix movie Don't Look Up, which was like a meteor's coming and like the way people react dictated the story. Some people reacted, I don't want to look up. Others was like they were drawn to religion. Others were like really obsessed about science, and others were just acting selfishly. And it's like the story only happens because people acted in different ways. Same with Lord of the Rings. If you look at that, Sauron, bad stuff is happening, but not everyone immediately agreed on what was the right path. Someone was like, why are we giving these rings to these hobbits? Why are we not giving it to a mighty warrior or something? And someone else was like, or like someone was like saying, wow, this Sauron guy, he seems like the winning side. I'm going to give up everything I believe in and just join him. I don't care that I'm going to join up with this guy. Even though I have a white robe, you thought I'd be the good guy, but it was wrong. No. And just like have these a little bit.
Totally get it, dude.
Yeah, I get it. Join the bad guy looks like the winning team, then do what you got to do.
I would like to again just call back to like when we talk about giving NPCs a little bit of life or giving the world a little bit of life. Like for everything, I always go back to why is it there and what does it want.
Yeah,
those are the guiding principles for me for any basics. Everything after that, you can go a little deeper depending on how much the players interact with the character, how much they want to know about the character or the item or the thing, like anything that is there in your world. Largely, you can have some things, like if you have these basics in place for things, then when your players get to it, you can expand on it as you go.
Yeah, because the interesting thing is like one thing that I think is like the dream. If you can manage it, I don't always manage it, but if you can manage it, every character, NPC, minor, whatever, is in the middle of their own story. They have their own arc that they're going for, and the players are just brushing up against it. And it's just like, even if his arc is like, man, I've got to get this cabbage in time for my anniversary to my wife. We've really been struggling, but I really think I can pull it together. He's having a romantic comedy while the players are setting the inn on fire.
And so I'm not doing that. Like I love putting random shit in my game. Like I will put John Wick in the game. Like the players it has nothing to do with the story. It has nothing to do with anything else. Yeah. But he will be there doing something. Yeah. Most of my stories that I'll tell somewhere or the other, there will be a Batman-ish character or an Aragorn-ish character somewhere or the other around for sure.
Okay.
I think it's like, oh, sorry. Basically, I think we were mentioning about, you just mentioned about making the characters feel like, all the NPCs feel like they have their own stories going. But I also feel like I absolutely 100% agree with that. But I think there has to be kind of like a mixture. If you make every NPC feel like they have their own story, it forces the players to kind of empathize and understand everybody's character. So it has to be kind of a mixture of, oh, this character is just this, mostly these one or two shticks, and these characters are also well built. Because somebody I meet once, like a beggar passing by me, I will just notice that one character trait. I won't notice every aspect about them. I just feel like that.
Although that's a little bit of like both real life and video games. Like if you meet someone and they only say the same dialogue over and over, you're like, okay, this is not an important thing. And then in your life, you might just see someone and like, okay, that is a beggar, that's a shopkeeper, and they'll leave their mind, and a player can ignore. But if you like in your mind just thinking, okay, even very simply, like his goal is to make money, and he will rip someone off to do it because of whatever reason. He wants to send his son to wizarding school. That's all you need. He just has that motivation, but it's there because you always know the players are going to pick one random NPC and they're going to be like, "Tell us your life story. I want to help you. I want to send your son to wizarding school." And it's like, thank God I had that in the back pocket.
Then you're just writing an entire mechanics for wizarding school in the background, like.
It's like, well, the wizard exams are really tough. You got to pay this amount of gold, get him a familiar, and then just like, yeah. But it's just like having these,
Yeah,
like also
scenarios
the
like
same.
this is where I think putting characters from pop culture really comes in handy. Like if they're really going deep into something, I'll just pick a character from pop culture and be like, all right, this is it. This is who you've met.
Can be helpful.
Somebody will realize from movie, and the tone will tell, whether they wanna play with that a little more or will they laugh and move on.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that. I also think Roshni was on a good point that you can't give every single character 15-page backstories unless you're Tan. Yeah, obviously not. But like just having these little bits of like,
even I don't do that.
What is this guy's journey? Like, what? Just like a little bit of like a journey arc. Like, I'm a god because I want to impress chicks. Great, that is a good arc. And then if the players want to push in, we can explore like, well, I used to be this scrawny kid and I was never picked for this fantasy dodgeball team. And then it's just like trying to do that. And, I want to be a bit of a Chad. And it's like, we get it. We'll make you a Giga Chad. They're like, oh God, why is this a side plot? Why is this happening? There's a meteor coming.
But to be honest, sometimes I think so. I think that's one of the fun parts of the improving bit of a DM, when you put in these random bits and then maybe you don't want to flesh it out as much, but you just added it, and then when your players want to just go into it to the next level, that's what their adventure now they want to make it, and then you go along with the flow, and that's where like having a little sketch out of a world makes sometimes is helpful. But at the same time, it's an entire chaos because you need to like now plan an entire adventure, which is fun in its own way because that's what the players want at that moment, and probably they are prioritizing that over the meteor. So could be a character arc in its way that it's important, but it then just becomes a plot line for the future.
Yeah, I actually leads up to what I want to discuss. When you're doing narrative and you're not writing a story, you're improvising. So like if there's any good improv tips and tricks you might have, Ada, do you have any like improv tips and tricks you want to like offer to help with like narrative storytelling or just RPG in general?
Absolutely. Funnily enough, I got into tabletop role playing from my experience at improv, and the rules have been really, really helpful. There are two golden rules of improv. Rule 1, yes and. Rule number 2, no but. Whenever a player does something, be it a conversation in a certain way or a particular combat move, it really shouldn't just be limited to itself. Improv is to build on the other person's actions. So yes, not only have you hit the guard in the head with your mace, you have also knocked off his helmet. Or on the other side, no, you didn't manage to seduce the princess, but one of her shield maidens is now eyeing you up. There is always something to be built on your player's actions, and they will consequently build on yours. And that's the heart of improv. Obviously, dice allowing. So you say a thing, the player builds on it, you build on them, and that's just how stories are built. Of course, if you have a very set story in mind, it might just get completely derailed as you're just having too much fun building on each other. But that's the difference between running your campaign like a theme park versus running it like a circus. If you're going to run it like a circus, then some improv tips are really your best friend.
Definitely, I get that 100%. Those are very good. That's a very good improv tip to remember. And also, as you have to remind it, it's always just good to remind the players so that they respect that as well. So they, when players start yes-anding each other or no-butting each other, it's like, great. I can just lay back and let the story happen. Why did I let the story happen?
Free
that's
Exactly. You
content.
still need a firm hand to make sure it doesn't spiral out of control.
Sure. Definitely. Before they start abducting dragons and whatnot. Yeah. So that sounds, yeah. Anyone
not
else?
Yeah,
Any other improv tips and tricks
I
you want to
did
like
have
mention?
a very well, not very. I had a slightly different take. I do agree with how yes, a DM and a player interacting with one another or players interacting with each other build up on improv and they create their own story out of it. But I also am someone who uses improv in a very reactive way in my games. So if I have a fully fleshed out world, I would have rules behind it. I would have things the world is consistent on, things the people that living in the world are consistent on.
Mhm.
They can be, simple things like maybe they have prejudices, maybe they could have laws, anything that basically guides day-to-day function. And if I have built up a world and someone does something in it, it doesn't matter if you don't write an encounter at that point. It doesn't matter if you don't have dialogue or anything. Because if someone does something in, let's say, the academic district of a very rich kingdom, you, as the DM, would know the kind of people in this district, you would know the kind of people not in this district, you would know how they would react to each other. You would understand the clash that happens, or maybe instead of a clash, how they gel well together. Basically, you would always know how each part of your world is reacting to the player. And as long as you have that information, no matter what your players throw at you, you'll be able to quote unquote improv out of it because you're just looking at it as a very logical thing at that point. You're seeing, okay, A will react with B, B will react with C, and then you're just going off of that, and you can tell a whole session just by doing that.
Nice. That's good.
I would like to add something here.
Sure.
Largely, I feel when it comes to improv, particularly, on again to put it out upfront, like I have been very lucky that I have played with very good friends of mine, so we have a very healthy respect between us. But in general, also, I believe the key is improv is not alone; it's always with people. So the key to all improv is respect. You have to respect other people. Uh, as long as you have a basic understanding between each other, the players, between themselves and the GM, you can improv as long as you follow the rules that many people said above. But like none of the rules will matter if you do not, if the players or any person around there does not respect anybody else.
I
Course.
absolutely agree 100% with what Ayush just said.
Yep.
You need that respect and understanding so you don't immediately improv your way into something that makes someone uncomfortable.
Yep.
Definitely. Yeah. After all, we're playing with friends or soon to be friends. It's important to get the respect and keep
Oh
that in
yeah.
mind.
Being on the same page at a table
Yeah.
is step one, in my opinion.
Yeah. I got good news, guys. We're ahead of schedule. We managed to get all the main points in. Now all we got are questions from the audience. Yay!
Yay.
Let's see how many of these we can get. Let's see. Any tips to prevent scenarios from dragging out in freeform games? Like, how do you keep stuff interesting without, sometimes players will be like, oh, let's spend extra time here. Let's, going on here. Like, no, let's do another side plot. Let's do, spend an extra long shopping episode. Like, how do you, prevent, things from dragging out in your games? Anyone want to take this?
I have two things I do usually because
Mhm.
I have this problem quite often because one of the campaigns I'm running right now has 9 players in it, so things drag on very quickly, very easily. And the way I would deal with it is either make the dragged on encounters flavorful. Like, for example, if they are shopping, turn it into a full roleplay encounter. Give the shopkeeper flair, give the shop some flair, and that's just suddenly instead of them taking care of their chores, they are now in a proper roleplay encounter. And the other one is if you don't have time for that, or if it's being dragged out in a very different way, uh, you can always either put in what I would call are slightly forced hooks for your plot to move forward, or just putting them on at least a mild timer. Just keep reminding them, oh, it is now 2 p.m. They do a bunch of other stuff. It is 4 p.m. Shops are starting to close down, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that stuff, overall, without too much friction, lets the plot move ahead while the players still get to kind of stretch their minds a little. So, yeah.
I think
Yep.
if you don't mind me chiming in. But
Fun.
I just want to ask about the question because I don't think we always have to force the converse or the everything to be. I mean, it doesn't need to be that we have to keep making things interesting. If all six of my players want to have this one day where they keep going to different shops, and if they want to role play, if that's a story they want to play out, then maybe we can go along with it unless and so I think a healthy communication will be really key because if somebody says, hey, I just want to buy like a calligrapher's tool, I can just ask, okay, do you want to role play that? We can expedite that if it's
Yeah.
just one person. So I think that communication is really key.
Definitely. I agree. Communication is definitely important for things like that. I felt this is more like if the GM is getting maybe a little bored of it being dragged on because they are a
Yeah.
player too, or if it's like one person's like really keen on like shopkeeper, tell me your whole backstory. I want the best deal I can, and it's like dragging for the others. I think they were like looking for those kind of tools. But that is a very valid point. Definitely, I understand that entirely. Definitely, communication is the first answer to a lot of questions. Just talk to them. Talk to them. You're already pretending that you're not talking to them in a funny voice. Talk to them normally.
I'd agree.
Yep.
Next.
I would just add to that one bit. I think so. What Tan said about the role playing bit. So, for example, if the situation, I think so, when you brought it up about, let's say one character wants to know the entire backstory while someone else wants to do something else, and they want to have their own thing. Probably sometimes what I feel helpful is adding a plot hook in that point of time. So while he is having a conversation, I'll say that while this is ongoing, someone else probably glances past or he sees something that is interesting to him, and now suddenly that player is invested in this, or something else happens around the world that is going to like, okay, now something else. But I think it's important to make it organic if you want to do a plot. Or you can't just be like, oh, randomly it's like the guards have called you. I think making, or if there's a reason to that and they've called you for a reason, then it's great. But I think making it organic and have other players doing things at the same time. So it's not just one person just sitting and listening to the lore, but then someone else gets a little bit of their time to do and figure something out.
Good point. I like that. Next question. I think I can't answer this. How important is learning story structure and its parts for a GM? Could we establish improv is useful? At least the two rules are very good. But how important is knowing story structure for a GM?
Not too important because it is important in the sense that you need to have a framework and a skeleton of how you're going to like progress your story, your sessions, and everything. But at the end of the day, it is an interactive story. There is a back and forth involved, and that in itself puts it in a slightly different field as a traditional like novel or a story would. And because of that, I feel it's good to at least have an idea of your framework, but you don't need to have it like set in stone, and you don't need to have like an exact understanding of what makes a prologue, what makes a climax, a build up, all of that. So you don't need all of that. It's an added bonus, if anything.
Yeah, I would disagree with that to an extent. I mean,
Sure.
honestly, I think that story structure in general is key, especially if you're not running massive long campaigns which are going to run for years. If you're running a one shot, if you're running a 3-4 shot, a small sort of thing, you need to have structure in place. Otherwise, honestly, and I've seen this happen in games as well, things will just drag on. They can drag on in many ways. They can drag on like people can just start joking amongst each other, etc. Where you have to go, okay, guys, focus.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, please. You're saying.
No, yeah, exactly. Like, so I'm someone who, for the most part, does run like long sessions, like long campaigns and stuff. But when it comes to one shot, definitely I agree. Like, you need a concise storyline that like starts and finishes in one session. And even for a long campaign, a start and end point is still important. That's definitely like something I would
Yeah, you
agree
can
on.
riff on a lot of things in the middle,
Yeah.
but you have to have some structure. And
Sure.
like I at least rely on it a lot, where I have things laid out that okay, this will happen. then these things can happen, and eventually things have to converge somewhere to lead to this point.
Oh yeah. That
Yeah.
much, yes. But anything beyond that, like being bound to it, also is something that I find
Fair.
myself always struggling against. Because
Sure.
Fair.
yeah,
I think this is fair. This turned out for one of the better disagreements I expected from an Indian
If
panel.
I may,
Yeah.
if I may split the difference between Ayush and Tan, I think it depends on what you mean by story structure. Do you mean rising action, falling action, climax, denouement? These
I think-
things tend to apply, as Tan Fighter said, when you're dealing with a story on your own. But having other collaborators effectively can take that structure out of your hands.
Mhm.
And I will agree with Ayush saying that you do need a firm hand as to where
Yep.
the story is going so it doesn't spiral out of control. Story structure I tend to stick to is setup, payoff, setup, payoff.
Mhm.
The payoffs will always lead in the direction you want the story to go.
Definitely.
So that way, the story keeps the momentum going. It doesn't get bogged down, and it's always going in the direction you want. The payoff could be something like you meet a particular NPC who will give information, or a particular item that will help you on the quest. But as long as you keep the chain of setup, payoff going, you will maintain a level of control for the campaign that you may not have had otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
That's good points. I think those are very fair. You have split the baby in half, and I think we agreed. Came up.
No one's splitting a baby here.
Fine, get away my biblical references. I can't do story talks. I can't do biblical references. You guys are killing me. But yeah, thank you
Like
guys.
the baby.
Yes,
Like the baby.
like the baby. The baby survives the story. It's fine. We have reached, and just like that, you listeners have also survived. We've also survived. It's been great. We've reached 10:30, and thank you guys so much for being part of this. I just wanted to say a few things. This is the fourth of 5 sessions. There's going to have another one tomorrow with a brand new moderator, brand new cast. It's going to be great. Listen to them all very smart people. And thank you guys, everyone who's listening. Thank you to the panel for being here. It was really great having all of you guys here. You're all fantastic. I want to play with you. I want to talk shop. I want to help us do an intervention for Tan Fighter because he's clearly gone mad, with all those notes. And by intervention, I mean teach me to write better notes.
Oh, you don't want me to teach you, don't make it.
Yeah.
A
Teach me
reverse
how to
intervention.
DM. Teach me how to DM. And yes, there are some more questions, but we can. I think if anyone wants to answer them, we can answer them in chat, or we can go into a separate chat if people want to keep talking. I understand maybe some people want to leave; they've got things to do. I don't want to make you guys stay longer than you have to be. But yeah, thank you guys, all you guys. I hope you all had fun.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely.
Great time.
We did.
Great
Thank you,
listening to
Chirag,
you.
for conducting this. This
Yeah,
is really
Chirag,
great.
It was great.
Yep.
great moderator, man.
Thank you. And does anyone want to plug anything that they're doing? Start with Ayush. Ayush, you want to plug your socials or anything you're up to?
Oh, no, just be good to the environment, guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Important. Captain Planet. Adai, anything you want to plug?
Nah, I just want to wish everyone a good night and great games ahead.
Sweet. Tan, anything you want to plug? Anything you're
I
up to?
just made a Twitter. It's called TanFighter117, and I will be soon hosting some games on this server as well when I free up.
Yeah. And also, Roshni, anything you want to plug?
Oh,
Or tell-
yeah. I don't have anything special. I do have Twitter at Roshni RAW SHNI. But yeah, if anybody has any tips for DMing and world building, please send it my way. I'm also looking for them. Anybody who's listening.
Nice. And Shady Shay, anything you want to plug or let people know where they can find you?
If you want to follow a very inactive Instagram, that's one place, but it's extremely inactive. It's only for lurking on reels. But beyond that, no plugins for me. But please have a great night, guys,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
have fun games ahead on this server and other servers. There are just so many games is going on.
Definitely. And Chirag? Oh, well, thank you for asking me, Chirag. Yes, you can find me at Tricky Said What. And also, I just so happen to be running the finale of Blades of the Yanta on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. on the Desis&Dragons Twitch channel.
You are?
I am, and I think you might pop in.
Oh, damn, I didn't know.
Amazing.
Definitely.
I'll see if I can free up, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Come see it. Come see if I live up to what I say about the DMing. Watch that. And also, episode 3.5 came out today. It's a plug-in, and it reveals, interesting backstory about one of our players. But yes, thank you, everybody. Enough chilling for myself. Stay on Desis&Dragons. It's good fun. It's a great server. We love all of you. And yes, we're going to be ending up this stream. I think if anyone wants to keep chatting, we can chat in Fireside. Otherwise, yeah. Thank you, everybody.